Hello, my name is LoG and welcome to part 4 of this minor diminished power-up. If you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And now let's get on to the lesson. All right, let's wrap this up with the final part. That's going to be, again, just simply moving through minor arpeggios, diminished arpeggios, etc. And we're going to be continuing with D flat minor, the sound of part 3. So let me recap what part 3 was. Descending D flat root to root. Going up the diminished, starting on the 7, just in a different position. Then coming down D flat minor 5th to 5th. Going up the diminished, starting on the 4 this time. And now we're on the 3rd of D flat. What do you think we're going to do? Go 3 to 3, right? Just descending, kind of the same thing we did in part 1 and 2, just backwards and on D flat instead of A flat. So that sound would look like this. Okay. And I'm playing flat 3, root, 5th, flat 3. I'm kind of up in the air on the best fingering, because sometimes when I play this, I'll play this kind of fingering, pointer, middle, pointer, ring. But lately, when I've been practicing, I've just been doing pointer, middle. So pointer, middle, like that. And I think that, for me, is a little bit more comfortable. But again, you can experiment. You can experiment with this whole thing, figuring out the best ways for you to play it. I mean, instead of playing this, you can always do this. Right, that particular shape is exactly the same thing. It's up to you to figure out what's comfortable, as usual. So I mean, to give you an example of like an altered fingering, we ended part 3 with this, right? That's what we did. But if you just changed that last note of the diminished, instead of doing this, if you did like that, see where that would set you up? That would set you up for this different descending D flat. So just that one little note change can totally change the fingering and potentially make it a lot more comfortable depending on what you're used to. So I'm doing this, whereas you could do this, which again will set you up for a different shape. So I would do that whole thing would be this, whereas you, if you wanted to, could do this. Same exact notes, same thing, just a different approach to where those notes are located, which can work depending on your picking, etc. So that's kind of what I mean by experiment with your own fingering. You don't have to go crazy, but sometimes slight little changes of single notes can yield some pretty drastic kind of different fingering, especially with diminished, because there's simply so many ways to play that, and they're all viable. They're all pretty easy to do. So just keep that in mind. So getting back to this part, we're coming down. Remember, D flat minor coming from 3 to 3. This is at least how I'm doing it. Flat 3, root, 5th, flat 3. Again, right hand technique is simply downstroke, then one upstroke handling all 3 of these notes, just like that. That'll follow through, just like that. Then we're walking up diminished from right here. That's the flat 3. So we're going to the nearby diminished starting location, which is 2. Remember our diminished starting notes, 7, 2, 4, and flat 6 of the chord that we're targeting. And that's a 2 right there, just back a fret from flat 3. That's where I'm going to play diminished. Pretty standard diminished shape that I've used quite a bit in this, and that's going to be the 2, hammer onto the 4, same string, next string for the flat 6, middle finger on my right hand, and then natural 7, ring finger on my right hand. So that looks like this. Right? Pick, hammer on, middle finger, ring finger. Kind of a little stretchy shape, but pretty easy to play once you get it. Then after we have that, we are now walking down, what do you think? The same kind of way that we've been doing it, 1 to 1, except we're doing D flat now. So like that. Kind of the same shape as we started with this whole thing. If you remember that from part 1, it's the exact same thing, except we're doing it on D flat and we're descending, just walking backwards. So it's the same exact shape. And this is 1, 5, flat 3, 1, 1 to 1 as I call it. And technically what I'm doing here, this one's a little tricky fingering wise. Again, up to you to figure out what you want. I mean, hell, you could do that. That's probably the more normal way to approach it, right? Just 1, 5, flat 3, 1. That's just that standard chord shape. You could do that. Again, I'm not doing that probably because of the next part, which we'll get into here in a second. But the way I'm doing it is middle finger, pointer, ring, and then pointer, maybe, sometimes pinky, let's see. Yeah, ring finger, that's what I'm naturally doing. So up the diminished, from here, the D flat to the 5, that's middle finger, pointer finger, ring finger on the flat 3, and then pointer finger on the root right there. So let me just recap all that, and there's one other little part that we have to get to, but let's get all this other stuff first. So down the D flat minor, 3 to 3, right? back a fret, start diminished on the 2. Pick hammer on, middle finger, ring finger, then up a fret. And I think, yeah, I'm definitely doing middle finger right there. So walking up the diminished, middle finger down, that's the root, to the 5th of D flat, and then ring finger here on the flat 3, and then pointer finger on the root. Yeah. This part, when I was practicing this, by the way, if you're curious, this was the trickiest part for me to play for whatever reasons. Like my fingers just did not want to do what I was telling them to do. So this was the trickiest part for me, at least. But that is how I'm doing it. So again, pointer, pinky, middle, pointer, middle finger, pointer finger, ring finger, pointer finger. And then to finish it off, we have one other little thing. And this is a real quick kind of E major or E flat major or E flat dominant, which is the setup to A flat minor, the first chord of the whole thing. So this kind of quick little hit right there of those couple notes prepares your ears to start the whole thing over again, which is of course targeting A flat. So that's what this little thing is right there. So when we descend the D flat minor, that's the root of D flat, right? What we just went over. After that, you're going to hammer on to the E flat, then play its normal 3, back down to E flat, its 5, and then to the A flat, and that ends the whole thing. So I'll watch that part real quick. I'll play the whole thing. You can see what it's like. Here's the E flat. And for that fingering, hammering onto the E flat, downstroke on its 3, upstroke on the root, follow through, playing the 5 pretty much like all the other sections whenever I do this type of move. And then downstroke on the A flat, and that's the A flat that starts the whole thing over again, back to part 1. So let me recap that a little bit. We're coming from here, 3rd of D flat minor, walking down the arpeggio, flat 3, 1, 5, flat 3, back a fret to the diminished, like that. Then to the root, down to root, 5, flat 3, root, and then up 2 frets to E flat, and we're playing E flat to root, 3rd, root, 5th, and then back to the A flat. So I'll play that a couple times without talking. I'll play it one more time a little faster. That's the part. So that's pretty much the whole thing. Again, with this track, we're only going to be playing just this final part, and we're going to be moving from 60 BPM to 140. But practice this part individually, and then you want to string everything together. Be able to run all of these parts non-stop without making a mistake really slow before you start the track. The track is, of course, going to move at increasing tempo. We're going to get to a point where this one is interesting because I could barely play. I wanted to really push myself for this one, and we go up to 160, and it's on the verge of being unplayable for me at 160. Maybe you'll be able to do it perfectly at 160. I definitely struggled, but I think I did an okay job, at least for the final video. So that is the tempo that we're going to be running this to, 160. Again, you don't have to get that fast, but if you want to push yourself, the tempo is there, and it is sort of fun to see, how well you can do it. But that's pretty much the parts. The main thing is just connecting everything, getting a solidified technique or solidified fingering with the left hand and technique with the right hand, so everything is super consistent. That's always the tough part with these very kind of moving, notey type of guitar passages, is just getting a definitive fingering that you're always using, so your hands always know exactly what they're doing and you're never kind of tripping over yourself. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's get on to this track. This one's going to move from 60 to 140. that does it for part 4 of this minor diminished power-up. As usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below, and I'll see you all in the final part.